Alrighty, welcome to the 163rd edition of the MMA Circus here on BloodyElbow.com and live on YouTube. My name is Nick Baldwin. I'm your host as always, and joining us as our guest co-host this week, the streak of Angela Clan-Kid Lawrence actually showing up to his own podcast is over. MMAfighting.com, Jed Meshew is back as our guest co-host this week. Jed, what's going on?
At what point do I get some ownership of this podcast?
Well, for what it is worth, I did tweet out I think a couple weeks ago that, you know, the blurb at the very top of the podcast notes where it says, you know, MMA Circus back for your listening pleasure. I accidentally put Andrew Lawrence as guest co-host. I called him the guest co-host in one of those. I didn't change that because I'm sure looking back on it for years from now, it'll still make you happy and all that. But yeah, so I guess that counts for something. The fact that maybe I'm not calling you the host, but I'm calling my host the guest co-host.
Sure. I think I should get some percentage of the show.
Yeah, well, if I send you a check, I'd be losing money, and so you know,
it'd be worth it.
I don't think it would be, but I'm curious. What happened? We were supposed to do the show an hour and 23 minutes ago exactly, but nope. Jed Meshew's internet going whack yet again.
I just decided I didn't like you. Is really what happened.
So the internet thing just complete made up lie.
Yeah, I was just like, you know what? I really hate Nick. I'm just gonna not show up. I'm gonna leave him out to dry. It's gonna be hilarious.
Ever since you've been doing these pre and post fight shows with Luke Thomas, and I mean, I like Luke Thomas a lot. He's the cream of the crop when it comes to MMA coverage, media, whatever. But hey, you gotta remember where you came from, Jed Meshew.
Luke is not even nominated for a World MMA award, so he's not the cream of anything. If anything, I made the post-fight shows with Luke.
Keep digging a deeper hole, Jed Meshew.
I ain't in no holes, homie. Luke doesn't watch this. He has no idea what's happening.
He doesn't know who I am, nor does he care, nor does he know what before the battle is. Well, I've said a few things to him on Twitter. He's recognized how young I am. Because I remember I said something to him, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't realize you were, 17." That's funny, but... That's basically the extent of my interactions with the one, the only Luke Thomas.
Well, that some people might say that's a good thing.
I think most people would. Most people would. Atlanta weather, I assume it's basically summer.
Oh yeah, it is summer. We're already firmly into summer.
It is very nice in Winnipeg right now. Actually, it's kind of cloudy today. We had a little bit of rain, but we haven't had rain. No, this is something that I'm sure it's very common in Atlanta, but for Winnipeg, not so much. We haven't had rain for 33 days, I read.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it really is. This is the driest.
So you have or haven't?
Haven't.
Oh, that's whatever. I mean, that's a long time, but it's not like.
But for Winnipeg, it's a big, this is the driest spring it's been in, I think they say, over a century.
Well, good for y'all.
It has to count for something, does it not?
Sure. Can we get to real things and not talk about literally the weather?
The weather is kind of entertaining, especially when it pertains to Winnipeg's weather. Because Winnipeg's the greatest city on earth, the city that never sleeps. And then, the weather.
Is that the name of Winnipeg? The city that never sleeps?
I'm just, do you play HQ?
I have. I have it downloaded. I haven't played in a while. It always pops up every day. And it's like, hey. But I just haven't played in a while.
So for the past probably month, I've known, maybe 2 now, I've known what it is. I think actually since Easter, and I play pretty much every day. And the one host, the guy, no matter where he is, he travels a bunch. Like one day he's in LA, the next he's in New York, Virginia, whatever. He always calls it the city that never sleeps. I don't understand that. But now I'm just going to call Winnipeg the city that never sleeps.
Go for it. That's fine.
I know it's fine. Okay. As you said, shall we move on to things that kind of matter? I mean, MMA doesn't really matter if we're talking about the grand scheme of things, but I guess in our lives it does a little bit.
I think, yes, it sort of matters at least a little bit. It matters more than us talking about the Winnipeg's dry season or whatever the hell is going on.
We might have Dirty 30s 2.0. You never know, Jed Meshew.
I don't care.
You don't care, but I know Liam Hughes, our devoted listener. He loves the weather talk, so got to give it to him each and every week. But anyways, let's move on. We had UFC 224 this past weekend in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. We had the UFC Women's Bantamweight Championship on the line. Champion Amanda Nunes, the Lioness herself, defended the title successfully for the third time with a fifth-round TKO over Raquel Rocky Pennington. We also had some other good performances on this card. Kelvin Gosselin picks up what could be the biggest win of his career. He's had a lot of big ones, but this is right up there. A split decision over Ronaldo Jacar Souza, one that I disagreed with but didn't complain about. And in Brazil, I was actually surprised that they didn't give it to Jacar. We also had Mackenzie Dern pick up her second straight UFC victory. And John Lineker won via third-round knockout over Brian Kelleher. And perhaps surprisingly, just as far as the actual result, Lyoto Machida makes it 2 in a row against fellow former UFC champion Vitor Finon Belfort, knocking him out in highlight reel fashion in the second round. And perhaps retiring Vitor Belfort, although we all know how that goes. Let us start at the very top. Were you impressed with Nunes' win? I thought she looked, I don't know if flat is the best word, but I think a lot of people after her win over Valentina Shevchenko, her win over Ronda Rousey, even the win over Miesha Tate way back 2 years ago, were saying this fighter could give Chris Cyborg a run for her money. And then after Saturday, I saw a lot of people saying, if this Nunes shows up against Cyborg, she won't have much of a chance. Did you change your opinion on what a potential Cyborg Nunes fight? Did you think Nunes looked good?
I thought it was an interesting performance. I don't know what exactly she had going on. But when I talked to Luke about it, she did a lot of things very well, but she didn't keep doing things well, if that makes any sense. So, like, she came out, obviously had a lot of success with the low kicks early and welted up Raquel Pennington's legs. And then she just got away from it. And I didn't really notice that Pennington was doing a lot of things to take that away. It just sort of seemed like Nunes kind of let it fall by the wayside in preference to try some other things. And similarly, she attacked the body in those kind of middle rounds pretty well and then sort of stopped doing that. Felt like she had a lot of success everywhere, and so it's a good performance by that regard. But she didn't really put together a composed game plan, like attacking a weakness. I get possibly just because she was better everywhere, so it didn't really matter. She was winning the whole time. But, I think she could have stopped that fight a lot sooner if she had stayed with the leg kicks or if she had stayed working the body to Pennington and tired her out a little more. So it was a good performance. The other thing, I think the thing most people noticed that kind of have changed their tune on a Cyborg fight, I'm a little bit in that camp. Before this fight, I would have picked Nunes over Cyborg. Now I don't know. I still do think Cyborg's probably on the downturn here, and Nunes has the potential to upset her, but Nunes got hit clean so many times by Raquel Pennington. Pennington she's not a hitter. She doesn't have the power to stop her. And if Rocky Pennington can draw you, Chris Cyborg probably going to be able to do the same thing, just a way better athlete, and can kind of compete with Nunes and be a lot better than Nunes in spaces like that. So I'm way more interested in that fight after this fight just because there's no one else for Nunes, but it was a fine performance.
Yeah, I thought it was a fine performance. I don't think it was anything special. I don't think we'll look back on Nunes' career, and I don't think this win will necessarily stand out. I think a lot of people who have been saying I wasn't super impressed, I expected more, or simply the people that expected this not to be. It was never a super close fight. Pennington definitely brought the fight. She made it somewhat competitive. I think Nunes was mostly one step ahead for the entire fight, but I'm not even sure a lot of people expected that. I thought, from the sounds of it, from just listening to other people's thoughts on the fight, they saw it going a bit more dominant than it did, and so maybe that sort of, changed their perspective on it. But ultimately, it was a good performance. She was, again, one step ahead. It was not a super one-sided fight, but one-sided enough. And unfortunately, what everybody was talking about is, of course, between the fourth and the fifth rounds. And so I say unfortunate just because I think it was a pretty good showing for both fighters, yet everybody is talking about the controversy that happened in Pennington's corner between the fourth and fifth round, where Pennington told her corner after sitting down on the stool that she was done. And I listened back to it yesterday, and I didn't hear this, but she said, "I want to be done." Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe that is exactly what she said. She didn't even just say, "I'm done." She said, "I want to be done." Where I think some people, you can make the very fine argument that a fighter saying "I'm done" doesn't necessarily mean they want to be taken out of the fight. Where if you say "I want to be done," that's sort of the key or the the sort of flag saying, "Yeah, I'm done with this fight. I'm ready to go home." This was very interesting. I am on the side of most people. I do not think her coach should have forced her essentially to go out in that fifth round. And I'm not just saying that on hindsight. You could, I don't know if I tweeted between the fourth round before Nunes did get the fifth round stoppage or not, but I was thinking in my head, and I guess people will just have to take my word for it. But I was thinking, yeah, stop the fight. I don't know why they are letting her go out, and it's quite ridiculous. And we saw why. The fifth round stoppage simply just proved that Pennington was not there mentally. She was out of the fight. She was done. She wanted to, be done. She wanted to go home, essentially, and she was not granted that ability to go home for lack of a better word. What did you make of all of it? Do you think the outrage is, does it make sense? Is it warranted?
I have a very, very simple answer to all of this. Everyone that thinks this was a good idea is stupid. I know that in the immediate aftermath, everybody was against it, and that was the correct reaction. And then a little later, you got Miesha Tate and some other people coming out, and even Raquel Pennington saying, "Glad my corner didn't stop it." It is a true fact that fighters are too tough for their own good. That's just a fact. And good for Rocky Pennington to think that she needed to do that. She didn't need to do that. Anyone with a brain should be able to reasonably figure out. Like, I don't give a shit what Raquel Pennington said in that corner. Truly, I do not. Amanda Nunes was beating the ever-loving shit out of Raquel Pennington, and Raquel Pennington was in that fight by the grace of being tough. That's it. Pennington's corner should have stopped that after the fourth round regardless. And that's the thing that, bothers the shit out of me, and so many people don't agree. Boxing does not take a lot for a corner to jump in and stop it. It really, if you watch enough boxing, it is the threshold for when a corner is going to throw in the towel is significantly lower than in fighting. And in fighting, you basically only see it if somebody is getting just the shit beat out of them, beat 10-8 rounds, just pummeled into non-existence. Where in boxing, if you're halfway through the fight and you haven't won a round and you're hanging tough and in there, you haven't been wobbled or anything like that, but you're not winning the fight and you're going to keep eating punches, the corner will just stop it. You know what, man? It's not your day. Obviously, you don't have this going on, and that's fine. And that's what happened here. Raquel Pennington was never going to win that fight. And this bullshit idea that Miesha Tate and other people are, well, if she'd come out there and landed the greatest submission in history, okay, she was never going to do that. Aside from whatever she said, that fight was booked. That fight was done. We all knew how it ended, and that was it. And it's okay to tap out to submissions. It's okay to tap to chokes, and it's damn sure okay to know when you were beaten and save your brain cells for future fights. Her corner was negligent in sending her back out there, and her saying she didn't want to go back out there just makes the case even stronger. Because like you said, fighters don't get stronger after they think they're done. Nobody's going to be like, I think I'm done. And then they're going to go out and suddenly have the performance of a life for 5 minutes and get it done. No, if this was an even fight, a 50-50 fight, and Rocky Pennington comes back to her corner and is like, I'm spent. I'm done. I don't want to do this. Okay, then you could say, look, Raquel, I know it's tough. It's hard right now, but this is what you train for. 5 minutes, get out there, you can become the champion. That's not what happened. It was, I know it's tough. You can go take 5 more minutes of an ass beating for no discernible gain.
Recover later. We can recover later. That I think that quote, that sentence, "we can recover later," stood out to me more than anything, because this sport. Now I know you're not quite about this as a lot of us in the MMA media, but let's be honest, MMA, at the end of the day, it's safety first, because this is a dangerous sport. And so why make it more dangerous than it has to be? Let's put safety first. Let's make safety a priority, very important. When it comes to weight cutting or not taking too much damage, overtraining, anything like that, let's do everything we can to make this sport as safe as possible. It never will be a safe sport, because ultimately it's getting punched in the face and getting choked out, perhaps unconscious, but let's do everything we can to make it as safe as possible. And her corner, sending her out in that 5th round just to take 5 more minutes, well, actually less than 5 more minutes, but a couple more minutes of getting her ass kicked, was not safety first.
It benefited nobody. It served nobody's benefit to do that. Like I said, they shouldn't have sent her out there. Even if she had come back and said nothing, they should have said, "Look, Raquel, really sorry, but we love you, and you don't need to go out and take more head trauma. You just don't. You can't win. Tonight's not your night. Save it. We'll try another time, but this one is over." It happens all the time in boxing, and it should happen. It's one of my biggest peeves with this sport. It should happen way more here.
Yep. And Pennington, obviously, as you mentioned, said after the fight, "Yep, I agree with my corner. I'm glad they, didn't pull me out of the fight. I'm glad they sent me out for the 5th round, sort of convinced me, or not even really convinced her, but sort of just said, no, you're not stopping." I'm glad that all happened. You really think, had they stopped it after the 4th round, after 20 minutes of Pennington always being one step behind, do you really think Raquel would have gone out and said, publicly on the record, or even thought it, even if she didn't say this on the record, do you really think she would have been upset? Do you really think she would have been mad at her corner for not giving her a chance?
She would have been mad in the immediate aftermath.
Of course, yes. But I mean long term.
In 2 months, she would be like, you know what, fuck. As soon as she went home and watched the fight, she was like, yeah, I wasn't winning that fight.
You just saved me 10 brain cells, and so thank you for that.
Like, all right, just call it what it is, and go back to the drawing board.
Something I find interesting, and this isn't totally, doesn't go hand in hand, but those fans or those people, because I don't know exactly who's been saying it, but anyone who agrees, there are actually some fighters out there who have been back. I mean, as you said, Miesha Tate, for example, Raquel's girlfriend, Tisha Torres, UFC's strawweight fighter. All of these people who are backing her corner's decision to send Pennington out in the 5th round, I find it odd how you can have some people agreeing with this decision, yet still crapping all over Mirio Yamasaki for letting Priscilla Cachoeira for being a warrior and not stopping that. Like, I mean, it's not the same. One's a corner, one's a ref, but it kind of is. How are people mad or not mad at the corner, but mad at Yamasaki for not stopping a fight sooner? It's kind of, similar, I think.
I'm rarely mad at referees, honestly. Like, every once in a while, if it's super egregious. But I'm always mad at corners because, straight up corners should just be better at their fucking jobs. This is going to sound really stupid to a lot of people, but it's only half a take. Like, there's a part of me that actually believes it. Like, in the early UFCs, in, UFC 1 and then maybe 2 and 3, but it did not last long. It might have only been 2. I think it was 1 and 2. The referee was not allowed to stop the fight, and only corners could stop the fight. And so it had to be 2 that was still the case, because you would have Big John McCarthy in there when somebody's getting their fuck beat out of them, basically looking at the fight and then looking at the corner and yelling, protect your fighter, and eventually the corner would throw in the towel. Like, I think if we just went back to that for a month, corners might remember that their job is to protect their fighters and not have their charges get unnecessary brain trauma.
Do you think Pennington's corner not stopping in the 5th round was because they were selfish?
Yeah. Or dumb. I mean, I don't think that they had money on Pennington, so they sent her back out there. But I think I think it was a fundamental misunderstanding of the sport, of what we are engaged in, of head trauma writ large, of CTE and the dangers that come with this. I think that at no point in their head did they think she is taking too much damage. All they thought was get out there, tough it out. The words tough it out were the only thing like, yeah, this sucks, but go out on your shield and all those platitudes that have pervasively invaded this fucking sport and every other sport, and not the reasoned thought of a person being like, yeah, you just don't, like, you're done, and that's okay. Because she wasn't it wasn't like Nunes was putting on 10-8 rounds on her where they had to consider where it's super blatantly obvious, like, oh, okay, well, yeah, she's getting fucked up. But Nunes was beating her up consistently with no sign of stopping at all. And there's no nuance in the corner in MMA. Like, nobody in MMA has the nuance that a boxing corner does. And so they kept her going. It wasn't done maliciously. It was done out of ignorance.
Something I find interesting about all of this is that I'm losing my train of thought here. People find you know what? Let me try and what am I? Something to do obviously with the stoppage. I don't remember what I was going to say. I guess we'll move on, and
we've talked enough on this.
This will bug me for the rest of the show. Something to do with Pennington, but I don't remember what I was going to say, so that's okay. Shall we move on to the co-main event?
Let's do it.
Kelvin Gosselin picks up a split decision win over Ronaldo Jacar Souza. This was a close one. Firstly, who did you score it for?
Initially, I scored it for Jacar. I am less convinced of that upon rewatch. I actually think the appropriate score for this fight is probably a draw. I think not giving Jacar a 10-8 round in the first is categorically wrong. I will argue that to my death. I also think that Jacar was landing a lot of good shots over the balance of rounds 2 and 3. Gosselin had him. It was one of those things where I expected Jacar to lose because he looked bad. Like he was gassed after 5 minutes. Clearly, the weight cut affected him. That's what he said afterwards, and the fact that he's old is dirt. But he had no energy, and so he looked like every punch Gosselin hit looked like it did a lot. Jacar looked just like dead on his feet for the back 10 minutes. But despite looking dead on his feet, he landed a lot of good shots. Kelvin Gosselin just has a great chin. I think it's credible to score the fight either way realistically, but I do think that Jacar deserves a 10-8 for that first. I feel more confident. I feel confident that Gosselin won the second round and that Jacar won the first. And I feel more confident that Jacar got a 10-8 in the first than Gosselin won the third round. So if this was pride scoring, like, I probably would have given it to Jacar. But it's one of it's a close fight. I think draw is the answer I'd give now, but it's fine. It doesn't matter.
I remember what I was going to say real quick before I give my thoughts on Jacar Gosselin. I was just going to say that it frustrates me that we have some people saying, hey, had Pennington gone out and landed a Hail Mary shot or a Hail Mary sub in round 5, that we'd be saying different things. I don't think we would be. Obviously, we'd be congratulating Rocky on becoming the UFC champion in such dramatic fashion and, just crazy come from behind victory. Won't get any sweeter than that, so to speak, but we'll still be saying, nonetheless, it should have been stopped after the 4th round. So it just kind of frustrates me a little bit that people are saying that, because I don't think, hindsight definitely is 2020, but I think in this case, no matter, had Pennington won or had it gone as it did, Pennington losing in brutal fashion, I think we're saying similar things.
I agree.
So I scored it for Jacar, as did you initially, but I can't complain. It was a great fight. It's funny, I remember on Before the Battle last week, we were talking about fight of the night, giving our prediction for that, and I said Gosselin, Jacar could be it, but I couldn't quite pull the trigger. It had fight of the night written on it a little bit, but I didn't, and so that is c'est la vie. This, Jacare gassing so early surprised me a little bit. His cardio has never been fantastic, but we've seen Jacare go 3 rounds before, and he's done it with relative ease. So that was surprising. As you said, it sounds like the weight cut definitely impacted that. So take that for what it's worth. But I think the thing about Kelvin Gastelum is that, we knew this going in. We've known this for the majority of his career, especially the last few years. But this guy is just so tough, and he doesn't have to be better than you, but he can still win. And because he has a melon for a head. He can take literally any shot from almost any fighter and not go down. I don't know what it's going to take to ever stop Kelvin Gastelum on the feet, that is. He's been stopped once in his career to Chris Weidman, but that was a submission. But as far as knocking the guy out, it's going to take some power that we haven't seen before, or just a lot of little shots, and him to be 10 years older than he is right now. But I think Kelvin Gastelum has a great story, just because he's not always the most technical guy, or as technical. Jacare Souza is a great fighter, but Gastelum just has this will to win, and it's what wins him some fights. To add on to that, he is very technical. He is just a very brilliant fighter. He is skill-wise very talented, and so this guy is, I've said it for a long time, I believe it probably more than ever right now, this guy's a future middleweight champion, or future UFC champion, I should say. Not sure about middleweight, because the problem with that is that Robert Whittaker is around his age, and probably beats him
beat the fuck out of him
in 2018, and so Whittaker's not going down anytime soon. Gastelum isn't. So maybe Whittaker and Gastelum are the two men who rule over the division, and have this epic trilogy. But I think right now I'd favor Whittaker, so that could make Gastelum want to go back to 170. But had it been Yo Romero at the very top, Gastelum could beat Romero right now. I wouldn't be shocked if that would happen. And so, otherwise, Whittaker, anyone else as champion, Gastelum's probably the champ at 185 pretty soon, and he'd stay there. But I won't be shocked if he moves down to 170 again. But yeah, Kelvin Gastelum is a fantastic fighter, and he's 26 years old, 27?
I think 26.
26. This guy's just getting better, and I'm very excited to see where he goes. It has to be a title shot, I guess, against the winner of Whittaker Romero.
Yeah, that's what's going to happen. It's fine.
That's
Robert Whittaker's going to beat the hell out of him.
Or the Soldier of God, might ruin those plans. You never know.
No, Robert Whittaker's going to beat the hell out of him. We literally saw those two fight like last year.
We did.
And Yoel Romero only got older. Like, it's just the exact same thing's going to happen. Like, Robert Whittaker's gotten better and Yoel Romero's gotten older. Same fight's going to happen, and Robert Whittaker's beat the hell shit out of Kelvin Gastelum. Jacare, dead on his feet, Jacare was bolting Gastelum with right and left hands. Like, Robert Whittaker is going to lay 8-piece combos on him.
Do you share? I don't know if this would happen for sure. I don't know if I really do think it'll happen, but do you share my sentiment that for the next several years, it seems likely that Whittaker and Gosselin could be number 1 and 2, neck and neck at 185? Do you think that's possible?
I don't.
No? Why not?
We thought that was going to be the same thing for Chris Weidman and Luke Rockhold. Look what the fuck happened there. Like, it's people come up. I still think Kelvin Gastelum is in the middleweight. He's thrived on fighting a division that's shit, basically. I've long been on the corner that middleweight is mostly a garbage ass division, and if you put any top 5 welterweight in it, they would have substantially similar runs that Gastelum is on, and that's it. Like, he can keep winning because he keeps getting matchups with bad people because that's all in the division, basically, or stylistically okay matchups in that Jacare is old, and so he's not, and that helps. But yeah, look, he could win the title and reign for 10 years. I'm still going to think Kelvin Gastelum's not a middleweight and not even a great one at that. So that's my corner. I'm hanging on to it.
Fair enough. Last thing I want to talk about from this card, because we have been talking about it for a little while now, is Lyoto Machida's big knockout win over the Phenom himself, Vitor Belfort, sending him into what he is kind of calling retirement. Well, he's saying it's his last fight, but he's not retiring. So take it for what it's worth. I'm sure he'll be in Bellator or Ryzen by the end of this year. What did you think about the fight, firstly? Were you surprised that Machida kind of just replicated Anderson Silva's knockout over Vitor many years ago, or were you expecting a bit of a dull decision like I think most people were?
I was expecting something probably really bad, and it still wasn't great, but it was a cool ending.
Well, yeah, I mean, the first round, nothing happened. I think you can count the significant strikes on your fingers, if not very close to it. And so I'm thankful that Machida got it done in the second, because otherwise we probably just would have sat through 10 more minutes of what we saw in the first round. Now, the funny thing with this is that, you hear the commentators, I think it was John Anik who said it, he has to say things like that because he works for the UFC and he needs to make the UFC look good and all of that. But he's, or it's fighters as well, of course, not just the company, but he roars, "Oh, Lyoto Machida is back." And no, he's not. Lyoto Machida is not back. I mean, he beat a guy who was just more done than he was. This doesn't show that Machida is back to his true form, to his true self, to 2014 Machida, who is beating Gegard and challenging for the middleweight title and doing pretty well against Chris Weidman for what it is worth. This is just Vitor Belfort being even more done than he is, which maybe we didn't think was possible. But
yeah, like I said, the division's dog shit.
Vitor Belfort was what, number 9 going in?
I don't know, but yeah, Vitor's going to lose to the top of the division likely, but it's a bad division. It's not impossible that he could beat Luke Rockhold if Luke Rockhold decided to fucking come back to middleweight. It's just a shitty division. That's all I got.
I suppose it is. Something I just noticed, Vitor Belfort, I believe, has been taking off the rankings.
He retired, so that makes sense.
Yeah. Elias Theodoro's in his spot at number 15 now.
Cool. Good for Elias. Let's move on.
What do we want to talk about? Chuck Liddell, to make things maybe more depressing.
No, that's fine. Look, I'm not depressed by the Chuck Liddell thing. I'm not excited about it. I don't particularly care. But Chuck's coming. All right, look, there are two facets to the Chuck Liddell thing. One, Chuck coming back to fight Tito is totally fine. Who gives a shit? The same way that it's fine for Lyoto and Vitor to fight. I don't have an issue with a Legends League of MMA where old people fight old people. Like I said, I'm a little less concerned about the mental health of fighters in general, because I think they're grown-ass men and women. They can do what they please for the most part. And as long as Chuck's fighting Tito, that's fine. He wants to rematch Randy again, okay. But the other part of the Chuck thing is him saying he can beat John Jones is literally the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's literally, I tweeted this the other day. Chuck Liddell wanting to fight John Jones is literally the worst idea in MMA history. And that's saying a lot.
Yeah, I don't think I can really disagree with that. So just to sort of sum up what has happened, Chuck Liddell announced on Monday's edition of the MMA Hour last week that he is coming back to MMA. And now that I think about it, I don't know why we didn't talk about this last week on the MMA Circus, but we didn't. So it was announced.
It was announced on Monday. Oh yeah, it was. He announced it to TMZ like a week ago.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure why, but nonetheless, Chuck Liddell said that he is coming back to MMA. Oh no, he announced it yesterday. What am I talking about?
Well, no, yeah, he announced on the MMA Hour yesterday.
Yes.
But he announced it last week on TMZ.
Right. For some reason, I was thinking today's Sunday, and I don't know. I probably need to go to bed. But Chuck Liddell announced yesterday on the MMA Hour that he is coming back to MMA, and that he will most likely fight Tito Ortiz in a trilogy match, probably at the very end of the year, either November or December. And as Jed alluded to, he wants 2 warm-up fights. I suppose the Tito trilogy would be included in that, in his perspective. And then he wants to fight former UFC light heavyweight champion John Jones. That's not going to happen. So I'm not worried about Chuck in that fight because it's not going to happen, but it's still just literally the most ridiculous thing anybody can say when it comes to mixed martial arts. I don't get it. I mean, I understand why he's going after John Jones, because you can make the argument John Jones isn't a good person, and I mean everything he's done when it comes to crashing the Mint League, when it comes to the hit and run, when it comes to his drug test failures, when it comes to everything else. Hey, I mean, I don't blame Chuck for going after John Jones, but you don't need to fight John Jones. It doesn't make sense. It's not going to happen. John Jones is in the UFC. Dana White's not going to promote a Chuck Liddell fight. I actually do believe that. I mean, Dana White does a lot of weird things for money because it makes sense business-wise, but I don't think Dana White would ever bring in Chuck Liddell because he kind of cares about Chuck Liddell, apparently, although he did fire him. So,
fire him?
Well,
WMG. Yeah, he didn't have shit to do with firing him. He didn't.
Do you think if...
I think Dana had zero to do with the firing of the lifetime employees. I think Dana sold a company that he wasn't a majority owner of, so it didn't matter that he sold it. The Fertittas sold it to people who, why in God's green earth would they agree to pay Chuck Liddell a hefty salary to do no work?
Yeah, I just
didn't have shit to do with it. I think if Dana got to choose, he'd still have Chuck employed.
You're probably right. I just feel like he would have been able to stand up for Chuck and for who was it? Frank? No, Matt Hughes. But I maybe not. We'll never know. But yeah, this is ridiculous. I don't want Chuck Liddell to come back. Fighting Tito Ortiz or John Jones or anybody else, I don't need to see it happen. The guy's 48 years old. He's been knocked out, 4 times in a row? He hasn't won in well over a decade. He hasn't fought in a long time. I get why, because he probably needs the money. It's another reason he's done all these shows. He was on, what was it, Big Brother? He went on the mountain hiking thing down in Peru earlier this year. He probably needs the cash, and so I can't blame him, but there should be people around him saying, Chuck Liddell, you're 48 years old. You don't need to be fighting. You're going to get hurt, and he might, and it's going to suck. But against Tito Ortiz, it's probably ideal. If they're both really wanting to come back and no one can stop them, that's the fight to make, because they're both old and they both can't really fight anymore, at least from what we know. I mean, we can't say for sure Chuck can't fight, but, you know, the fact that he's 48.
Chuck fighting again, good for him. Like, it's the only fucking thing, like, why not? That's the answer. Like, he can make...
Because he's 48, that's why. Easy answer.
No, he can make probably $1 million to fight. Straight up. Like, if I'm 48 years old, and it's the same game that, like, me and my friends and most people play, like, what would you do for $1 million? Would you eat a dog turd or whatever? Like, it's the same shit. Like, hey, would you go get punched in the face? Like, right now, if I asked you for $10 million, would you get punched in the face by Mike Tyson?
Yes, but...
Yeah, goddamn right you would. And guess what? That's basically what Chuck's doing. Only it's not Mike Tyson. He's going to fight Tito fucking Ortiz, the guy he's beaten twice. He's going to make $1 million to do it. Of course he's going to take that deal. And frankly, he fucking should.
Well, that's why I said I don't blame Chuck Liddell. I get why he's doing it. I understand.
Exactly. So then why is it bad?
Me personally, and the MMA community, as our selfish selves, we don't want to see it. Because
I don't give a shit. I will happily watch him fight Tito Ortiz. I do not care. Nobody's going to get seriously injured in that one. Like, Tito has a bigger likelihood of taking the damage in that one just based off past experience. But I just don't care. Like, let him live his life. Who cares? I would much rather save my time to mother and dictate to fighters involved in active fights and their corners and what should and should happen than to a guy who is trying to get a paycheck. That's fine.
Well, I mean, you can think what you want. I mean, you definitely bring up a good point.
He's a grown-ass man making a grown-ass man decision, and that's fine.
I mean, it's a good point. Not necessarily one I agree with, but hey, he's going to get a lot of money for it. I hope, anyways. I hope he gets paid for it. And so maybe we can't. I mean, I know we can't blame him how I said it, but I mean, no one's going to stop him. He'll do what he wants, and
All right.
so at least it's just Tito Ortiz. But anything
Moving
like,
on, what else do we have?
all right, moving on from Chuck Liddell, we got some good news. We got some news that you are going to mostly talk about. Maybe I'll ask you a couple questions, but because I don't really know much about this, you do. And so recently, just today, actually, the Supreme Court of the United States
Yes.
lifted a federal ban on sports gambling all across the United States of America, and so now states are able to legalize gambling on sports. Is there any other specifics to add?
So in the U.S., there are 4 states where sports gambling to some extent is legal. Nevada, obviously, the big one. The other 3, I don't recall exactly, but the key points there is those other 3 states only allow parlay bets, so you can't bet on single game or single bet action. So you can't say I'm going to bet that the Cavaliers are going to beat the Lakers tonight. You have to have it tagged in as a teaser or something like that. Now all of that is likely gone. This is basically the biggest news in the sporting world in my lifetime. It's going to make an enormous difference fundamentally in a lot of ways. Mark Cuban this morning, Mark Cuban, obviously people know who he is, pretty smart guy, knows a lot of things. He opined that this decision will double the value of all active sports franchises. And while not being nearly as vested in it as he may or may not be, think that sounds a little high. I do think it's going to raise the value of every sports franchise across the board. Sports gambling in the United States is a $5 billion legal industry, and some estimates are that $150 billion transact illegally in this country every year. So it's a lot of money that is now suddenly going to be flushed into states and into people. And I mean, just the reality is a lot of the people that don't bet on sports do it because having a bookie is a little weird. It's still legal. That's obviously a deterrent. If you want to use any of the various sites, sometimes you can have a poor experience with them. Personally, I know that feeling. So it's because it exists in that illegal area. You're not getting the best product you always can, which is sort of the appeal Vegas had, is that it was a regulated and legalized industry. So now across the board, there are like 10 states ready to roll out like pretty quick on it. And some estimates think that over half of the state, like the United States, will end up legalizing it in some form or fashion. It's going to change everything. Like just straight up, it's going to change everything. So I'm excited to see what happens with it. It's likely going to, I think it's a boon for the UFC. Just, the best way to make people care about fights is to make them have a vested interest in it. People have a vested interest in Conor McGregor for whatever reason they do, but it's impossible to make people care about whoever's fighting on an undercard. But if they put $50 on it, then people suddenly care. So now that more people are going to be able to bet more, fighting is unique in that it is a 1v1 activity. So that has more appeal to gamblers in general, less variables to deal with than, say, a football game where you've got 11 on 11 or what have you. So, yeah, it's going to be really big. I'm interested to see what happens. I think there's a potential that Vegas, as a city, may take a bit of a hit here since everywhere else is going to now have it available. So some of the allure of Vegas drops off, and that could be a good thing for the UFC. So
A good thing.
well, if the city of Vegas is generating less money because they are getting less tourist dollars from gamblers coming to them, because it's no longer an exciting prospect to fly to Vegas when you can go to the casino in your local Capitol building or whatever like that. Or any of those things. You can go to the sports book down the road. Like it's a little bit less of an appeal to go to Vegas, not entirely, but I think this decision likely does create a drop off in some of Vegas's tourism industry. Just as a result, they don't have a monopoly on this one thing anymore that people give a fuck about. So if that's going to drop off, Vegas is still going to want to recoup that money. They're still going to want to get those dollars. And so then things like the Las Vegas Knights and UFC events, like those are prepackaged, ready-made events that can draw people in from outside of Vegas. Because people who go to UFC events in Vegas are, by and large, not Las Vegas residents. It is people flying in or coming in, and that attracts people. So it can give the UFC a little bit more leverage with the local Vegas, authorities for whatever they may want to do. It just gives them a little bit more power in that position. I also think that while similarly, they might see a drop off in their Vegas event attendance a little bit, just because, again, people are less incentivized to fly to Vegas for a fight card they might like because it's not as special anymore. They can just go to their local brick and mortar, place some bets, and watch it at home. I do think this creates a better opportunity for them as they continue traveling. So, like, it's less. All this is pure speculation on my part. But like when the UFC goes into a new market, they're going to Boise for the first time or whatever coming up, and that's probably going to sell out because it's the first time the UFC's been there. So it's an event people care. But when the UFC like hits the same spot for the fifth or sixth time, then it's people are less likely to care about the UFC going to London unless it has a good main event or whatever. But if the UFC goes back to NYC is always going to have a draw. If the UFC comes to Atlanta, they've been to Atlanta a couple of times. If they come back to Atlanta, I think you're likely going to get more of an attendance pull, just because what will theoretically happen in this scenario is people have more reason to go. They're more vested in the thing. I think it's going to change the live sporting experience across the board. So when you go to a Jets game or you go to a Hawks game or whatever, now you will likely be able to place wagers at the stadium, which is just one more thing to get people to go to live sporting events. So it's going to open up a lot of things. It's going to change a lot of things. It's going to be a bit murky waters early, rough waters. The UFC in particular is going to have to navigate fight fixing as a problem. Because I wrote a column on this morning. An NBA player making $540 as the league minimum for a year is less incentivized to throw a game than an undercard fighter making 10-10. Like if you're an undercard fighter making 10-10, and you can now bet legally, just have your family members go dump a bunch of money and then throw the fight and get more money than you would even if you won your bout. I think it's a little Chicken Little. You don't have to super worry about it, but it is a thing that makes sense to start happening to a degree now.
This is a question more just for me than anyone because I'm not super familiar with betting because I can't legally do it, even though now it is legalized in the States or will be or could be in certain areas in the U.S. How do people bet now with online bookies? Is that because, assuming it's legal, and if it's not, tell me, but if it is legal, is that because all these bookies are based outside the U.S.?
Correct. So they're all websites based outside the U.S. where their gambling laws allow it. It then becomes this kind of legal gray area in the United States where you can't bring any action against those bookies. So, like, if somebody shorts you or fucks you up on one of the sites, there's no real way for you to, like, bring cause to the courts. So it's just a trust thing. Similarly, with your bookie around town, if you have an actual God's honest bookie, if he doesn't pay you the money he owes you, you don't really have a lot of options for how to deal with him. So it's, like people like Five Dimes and Bovada and that shit, they got hosed, Donnie. Like they got hosed.
Really?
Probably. I mean, they're probably screwed. I mean, I'm sure
because people now because Five Dimes is very popular.
Well, it's possible. It's possible not, but like I would if if gambling were legal in Georgia, there's no way I would ever use 5 dimes. I don't use 5 dimes anyway. But if I could just go up to the corner and place bets with a verified bookie or whatever, why in God's name would I deal with 5 dimes?
Right. Okay, that's interesting to know. Just as a person who doesn't gamble, but once I do turn 18, I might throw a few dollars on certain things. I guess all these online bookings, some of them seem professional, some seem trustworthy, others don't sort of have that appeal or look like that. But it's interesting that to know that you can't always trust them, or they could short you, and if they do, there's nothing you can do, and things like that. So, it's a good thing that it'll all be regulated, that it'll be legal, that you can do it, and hey, you're not going to get shorted. I'm not saying that happens all the times on 5 dimes, but yeah, I think it seems from everything you've said, it seems good all around. Just speaking of, you mentioned bookies around town, I still am owed $25 for a May Mac bet.
From who?
Just a person at school.
Oh, well, that person was dumb.
Yeah. It was a 4-1 odds. I would give him 100 if Connor won, and he would give me 25 if
that person was still dumb.
Oh yeah, I mean, because you could get better than plus 400.
Yeah, you could get way better than those odds. So yeah, good bet on your part. Solid work.
Yes. I think I also did with another person, a person that knows MMA. I think I did Shevchenko against Cachoeira at like 5-1 odds, and meanwhile online she was 10-1. Yeah,
possibly dumb.
I take advantage of people. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't be admitting that on air. But,
sorry, you're very Canadian right now. Sorry.
Okay. What else is there to talk about? UFC Fight Night 129?
I don't care. Honestly, I think the main event of this is Usman Maia, right?
It is.
Oh, I'm super glad I even knew that off the top of my head. I am going to try really hard to see if I can think of a single other fight on this card.
Okay. I'll give you 10 seconds.
UFC Chile. Is Cheeto on this card? I feel like Cheeto should be on this card. I don't know. I got nothing.
We got the co-main event between Alexa Grasso and Tatiana Suarez.
Okay. Ooh, I'm looking at the card right now. I am definitely not watching this motherfucker.
Grasso Suarez is actually a good fight, but it's just not a co-main event.
I don't give a shit about that fight. The fight's fine.
Cannonier Reyes is actually kind of fun, but
100% a fight. My advice to any of you people watching this is set your DVR, record this, and do something better with your Saturday night. I'm not here to lie to you. This is dog shit.
Especially
your life will be. It's on Fox, so the pacing is going to take you 18 hours.
I was just going to say it's a 10 p.m. Eastern card with 6 fights on the main card.
DVR. So. I am not doing this on Saturday. That's fantastic. I have a date that night. So that's great. DVR this. Go back, speed through, and watch just the fights. And frankly, probably speed through and watch just the good ones. Head over to MMAfighting.com. We'll let you know what's cool and what's not. Whoever's working it will. And then you can just watch those, because damn sure don't waste your Saturday night on this dog shit. Who is Usman supposed to fight? He's supposed to fight Ponzinibbio?
Ponzinibbio, yep.
Well, that would have been a good fight. This Maia fight's not. But the Usman-Ponzinibbio fight would have been good.
I guess let's quickly talk about the main event. There's
Moreno
not tons
Pantoja is a good fight, but that was rebooked, wasn't it? Wasn't that fight supposed to happen somewhere else?
No, you're thinking of Moreno Ray Borg, which was pulled because Borg, has his baby.
Yeah, that's right. But that fight was rebooked. Yeah.
Yes.
But then there's a stepped in. That's actually still a good fight.
It's a good fight, but like every other somewhat good flyweight fight, it's just, in the middle of the prelims, and no one's really going to care about it or watch it.
I don't care where it's put. That's a fight I actually care to watch.
Sure.
Other than that, I don't think I care about anything on this card.
I think there's some good fights.
Vicente Luque, Chad Laprise is like an okay fight. Those are two, like Luque and Laprise are both fighters that are like actually very good fighters, and I super couldn't care less about them. But I do know that they are both good fighters, and so by that mark I should care, but I just don't.
I think also Benitez Banane might be some fun. I know Wes Riddle, our
Neither of those guys should be in the UFC.
I think you can make the argument for Benitez, and Bandone is
If
one
you
of
have to
them.
make the argument, he shouldn't be in the UFC.
All right, Benitez should be in the UFC. No argument needed.
Exactly. If you have to make an argument on why they should be there, then that means they shouldn't be there. The UFC should trim the fat.
I don't disagree. I just think trim maybe not too much or as much, but nonetheless, Maya Usman. Is there any intrigue here?
Nope.
No.
Super no. Super no.
So you're just all Usman pretty much.
Yeah, it's gonna look exactly like the Colby Covington fight. Only Usman isn't a dog shit striker, so Maya won't win a round. Damian Maya beat Colby Covington on the feet for a round because Colby Covington is actually not a very good fighter. Kamaru Usman is a good fighter. He's going to not wrestle with Damian Maya and just beat him up.
I suppose so. Yeah, over 5 rounds, that might change a little bit. Usman, has he gone 5 rounds? I don't think he has. So that'll be interesting.
I don't know that he's going 5 rounds this time either.
Yeah, I guess there is a potential for him to knock Maya out, hey?
There's a high potential that Maya gets Mark Warded here.
Well, that might be a little depressing, but hey, Usman might finally get that high-profile win he's sort of deserved for a long time, so I'm not going to complain all that much. That's pretty much it for UFC Chile. I'm just trying to look back and think. So we covered Chuck Liddell, we covered UFC Chile, covered 224, covered the gambling stuff. I think it is time to move on to Gets It Doesn't Get It.
I'm for it, always.
Number 1, Gets It Doesn't Get It. King Mo, after losing to Ryan Bader via 15-second knockout at Bellator 199 this past Saturday, has said he's moving down basically one weight class because most of his career has been at 205, although his last 4 or 5 fights have all been at heavyweight. He's obviously a blown-up heavyweight, so the cuts to 205, nothing terrible, but he has announced he is planning on moving down to middleweight. Do you think that's a smart move? Does he get it, or does he not get it?
I don't care. I'll say doesn't get it, not because I think moving to middleweight's bad. I think he's a middleweight, so fighting at the division that your natural weight is. Also, the middleweight division in Bellator is pretty fucking soft, so probably do fairly well there. But like, I think the money weight idea is the correct idea. Like, you're a prize fighter, fight at the weight in which you can make the most money, whatever that weight is. And King Mo got to be in this tournament and has had good fights that have probably paid him fairly well over the course of his last few years. Because he fought at heavyweight. Yeah, he lost, but like, okay. Yeah, if he wants to move to middleweight because he wants to get a title and have a sustained run, then it's a terrible idea because who cares? Like, you probably won't have a long run anyway if you did get a belt, but whatever. So I think it's a bad idea.
Gegard Mousasi will be the middleweight champion in a week or so time. King Mo's not going to be the middleweight champion.
There's like a real good chance that King Mo could beat Gegard Mousasi. You know that, right?
I disagree, but
like, it could happen the other way too. Don't get me wrong, but like,
I'm not saying Gegard would be a minus 600 favorite, but I would definitely favor Gegard in that fight.
I mean, Gegard already lost to King Mo. You know that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I knew they fought, but it was before my time. But things change.
I mean, I would favor Gegard at this point, but like, he didn't look good in his last fight.
No,
I could easily see Mo just wrestling him for 5 rounds. Like, it could totally happen.
You never know.
So I'm saying doesn't get it because he got it when he was a money weight, and restricting yourself to one weight class is dumb.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I don't think King Mo gets it. More so just because I think the weight cut's going to be a lot, pretty tough. I don't think he'll have an easy time getting down to 185. I know that's something, again, you're not concerned about. You don't care about weight cutting. You let people do what they want. I don't think it's going to be the best cut for him. And so I think 205 is the weight class he should be at, or, of course, heavyweight, where the money apparently is at. Being the tournament was great, but dropping down to 185, I don't think it's the best move. So King Mo, you, sir, do not get it. Kelvin Gastelum, after beating Jacar Souza via split decision, as we discussed earlier in the program, he said he most likely won't accept a fight other than a title shot assumingly against the winner of Romero Whitaker too. Do you think Gosselin is kind of, we expected this from Gosselin or Jacar? I mean, it seemed to be a number one contender fight for the winner of Whitaker Romero, but I mean, whether or not he actually holds up to that word or not remains to be seen. But Gosselin, do you think he gets it?
Yeah, he should hold off for like it. The only way he wouldn't get it anyway is if Romero ends up upsetting Whitaker and they have to do a trilogy match immediately. But otherwise, I think he's getting it, so he doesn't have to say it. But yeah, I think he's doing right.
I agree. Kelvin Gosselin, I mean, he's a fighter. As I talked about earlier, he has a lot of will to win. He's super tough. He's gritty, all that, a lot of heart. And so if they said, no, we want you to fight one more time, he'll probably take that fight, going against what he said on Twitter, but or wherever he said this. But ultimately, I think if he does sit out, it makes sense. He doesn't need to take another fight. He shouldn't. So yeah, Kelvin Gosselin gets it all day for wanting to wait for the middleweight champion, whoever that may be, after June 9th. A last one. This is one you might have a few things to say about just because you were covering the card, but Bellator 199, the co-main event was John Fitch's debut in the promotion against Paul Daly. He, not too surprisingly, grinded out Paul Daly over 3 rounds, winning a fairly one-sided decision. Paul Daly was seen off his back, booing his own fight, talking about Bellator. I believe he said something about, oh, this is going to do great for ratings. Millions of people are going to want to watch this fight, all of that. Does Paul Daly get it for what he said in fight?
Sure. I mean, he's right in that Bellator shouldn't have hired John Fitch. There's no reason to. Like, the UFC should not have cut John Fitch when they did, because he was still a very top shelf welterweight. And if their goal should be to accrue the best talent in the world, to maintain the fact that they are the premier organization in this sport. Bellator is not under those rules, and more to the point, Bellator shouldn't give a shit about who's the best fighter. All they should care about is entertaining fighters. That's all they should care about. John Fitch is Paul Daly has been one of the more fun MMA fighters of the last 2 years. And what did we fucking get on, booking him against John Fitch was it was malpractice, promotional malpractice to steal Luke Thomas's brand. It was just bad. So he sort of gets it, but at the same time, shut the fuck up and take your lumps, homie.
Yeah, I think Paul Daly gets it because he had people talking, and that's really all that matters. In a dominant decision loss, people were talking about Paul Daly, and I think it counts for something. Not a lot, but hey, he made the headline, so I'll say Paul Daly gets it. Moving on, we got one dumb question, and that will be the show. It comes from Ed. You can follow him on Twitter at MMA Tweets. He says, what is the youngest version of Johnny Bones Jones that can beat Prime Chuck?
Good question.
Yeah, it is an interesting.
That's not even a dumb question. That's actually a good question. Let me pull up his record really quick so I can refresh my memory of how he'd rock during the early days. When he debuted, he wouldn't have beat him. When he debuted with the UFC, he's still really wild and stupid with a lot of his shit. Yeah, the Andre Guzman fight, I don't think he's beating a prime Chuck. Stephan Bonner could have been somewhere between Stephan Bonner and Matt Hamill. The Matt Hamill fight, he's beating Chuck. So either Stephan Bonner or Jake O'Brien is when he's gonna beat Chuck. Somewhere in those two fights. Unclear on which one to me without going back and watching a bunch of tape.
Yeah, I can't really add to that just because the first John Jones fight I saw was, wait for it, the Chael Sonnen fight. So,
well, that's Jesus. You're so young.
I've only known a good John Jones, not a I've known that doesn't really go well. A good John Jones, a talented John Jones, I think is maybe better phrasing. Yeah, that's that. I didn't see his debut, didn't see his rise to the championship. All I saw was his dominance and his fall, and so I'll agree with Jed. I'm sure his very first fight in the UFC, maybe he's not getting past the prime Chuck Liddell, but not too long after, he's probably beating the Iceman. So that's what I'll say. That does it. Episode 163 of the MMA Circus is in the books. Thank you all very much for watching. We really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this show, if you're watching on YouTube, either live or the replay, give us a big thumbs up down there. I would really appreciate it. And once we're out of here, click the MMA Circus name down there and then hit the subscribe button. And I would really appreciate that. And finally, if you have any feedback for the show, good or bad, drop a message in the comment section down below, and I will reply to you if need be. Jed, thank you for coming on as our guest co-host, as you often do. If people don't know where to find you, they probably should by now, but you never know. There could be a few stragglers. Let them know where they can find you on social media and all of your MMA coverage.
I'm on social media, Jed K. Meshew on Twitter. Give me a follow. Appreciate that. And you can find all my coverage at MMAfighting.com. Stay tuned. I got some big things in the work with the site that I'm excited about, so that should be fun. And thanks for having me on, as always, Nick.
For sure. You guys can find me on the Twitter at Nick Baldwin MMA. You can find all of my writing over at bloodyelbow.com. You can check out all my interviews on this YouTube channel, and some, of course, do find their way over to Bloody Elbow as well. Yesterday, I talked to Gegard Mousasi, who will be challenging for the Bellator middleweight title next weekend at Bellator 200 in London. I also talked to just before Gegard, I talked to his protege, Costello Van Steenis, who is a 9-1 middleweight, also on that Bellator 200 card. Two great interviews. Those will be up next week during fight week. Check out my interview with Julian Marquez. Don't have too much other interviews going on this week, but I'm sure I'll have a lot of stuff up on Bloody Elbow within the next few days. So keep your eye out for that. You can find the MMA Circus, of course, on Bloody Elbow. Thank you to them for presenting this show each and every week. You can also find us here on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Cast, Google Play, SoundCloud, TuneIn, Player FM, Overcast, Podcast Addict, and pretty much anywhere else you can find a podcast. So go rate us, review us, subscribe, go like us, go share us. Anything you can do, do it. We'd really appreciate that. For Jed Meshew, I am Nick Baldwin, and we are out.